Blue Mind is a platform to raise consciousness and to elevate your performance and develop your physical and emotional health. We interview experts in mind and body, writers, sports people, entrepreneurs, and those with an inspiring story to tell to help us all raise our performance to the next level. So welcome to Blue Mind.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Blue Mind podcast, Blue Mind show. Absolutely delighted to have a psychotherapist, mother, wife, CrossFit athlete with us here today. Ed's here. He'll be asking his insightful questions as always. Before we get into it and introduce our guests in a bit more detail, if you do like our content, if you do gain some insight from these conversations, give us a like, subscribe, share with all your friends. But without further ado, Joe Ross, welcome. Thanks.
Hi, Joe.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me. Good energy to start us off. Good energy.
Go.
Yes,
Come on.
Love it, Joe. So we're going to get straight into it.
Sure.
So on your Instagram, you talk about no health without mental health. What is your formula for a healthy mind, for good mental health?
Wow, really lovely starter question. I get formula, maybe a challenging thing to put together to sort of begin with, but I guess where that sort of phrase comes from is you read it a lot in kind of mental health sort of literature. There's such a connection now between physical health and mental health that you've got to be looking after both. You've got to be thinking about the connection between what our minds are doing and our bodies, our gut, our physical sensations, everything we're feeling is so connected. For a long time, people think of them as two separate things. So I really like to always consider the integration of the two. So I guess that's the formula. You've got to think about your physical health and what's going in your emotional state and put those together. And if you're considering both, then you're on a good sort of path to get you started.
Awesome. And that's something that, and you're heavy into your functional fitness. You do CrossFit on a regular basis. What what advice do you give people about creating awareness around that body and mind, that gut and body connection and the mind, etc.? What do you do specifically, and what advice do you give?
Yeah, so I think what's really important is to and I think you've discussed this probably quite a lot, is being more aware of what your body is telling you. So if we were all to think for a minute about what our bodies are telling us, my heart is racing right now. What's that telling me? That tells me I'm feeling a bit on edge, not sure what's going to come, how I'm going to perform, wanting to do a good job. But I'm not aware of that right now in my thoughts, but I can feel that in my body. My body is telling me something.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of it. Sorry, go on.
Have a quick breath moment.
Yeah.
To get that
so I love that, because that is, so what I've experienced and heard there, right? That is a sign of vulnerability there. You have literally shared how you are feeling in this very moment, and it's creating that awareness and feel the feels, if that makes sense. Please go on. Tell me more.
And I guess I wonder, how are you guys aware of how you're feeling right now in this moment?
I feel excited because I absolutely love speaking to people. I feel like I'm going to learn an awful lot from this conversation, Joe. So I'm curious about the questions I'm going to ask. I've prepped as well. I've got some notes here, and I really want to get the most out of this time. And do you know how that feels in your body? Do you know what your body's feeling in connection with that excitement? How does that feel? Very much calm, very much being present. I can feel my breath. I can feel the air, the oxygen going through my nose, and I'm being very much aware of how I'm approaching this conversation. I'm somebody, I spoke about it in briefly with the conversation we had with our previous guest, with Dr. Matt Slavin, that I feel very anxious going into situations. That's what I feel. It's not necessarily the truth or how I think about the situation, but in terms of how I feel, I get very as you know, I coach CrossFit a couple of times a week. I get very nervous at the thought and the feeling of taking those sessions. And it's about, the way I view it is putting yourself in that situation on a regular basis and just expanding that tolerance, but very much aware of how I feel in my body in those experiences.
Yeah, and that's key. You know, if we're not tuning into that enough, and people don't tend to do that, I suppose when people come for therapy, they'll say, I want to change the way I feel, I want to change my emotional state, without really connecting that there's much more to it than just an emotional state. I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling worried. What does that feel like in your body? What are the thoughts that are coming as a result of that? And then you can work out what needs to happen next. They want to come in and want to come for the solutions, especially with a therapy approach like CBT, where people imagine it, what people are led to believe, it's just tools and techniques, when it's much more than that. So being aware of your body, then knowing what your body needs, what's the need it's asking me for, that for me often links to doing some exercise, moving my body. So that awareness then links to the sort of, how do I link my mental kind of awareness into a physical health benefit as well. So the two link in really nicely.
Love that. Ed, I've got some questions around CBT, but Ed, I thought it might be a good opportunity to ask you, how can you relate to what Joe is sharing with us right now? When was the last time that you felt something and it wasn't perhaps a true reflection of what was going on?
Well, yesterday. I mean, how do I feel, I guess, about the meeting? Super excited. I'm really proud that we're consistently getting people like Joe on to talk. I think I'm really happy to be here and to learn, as you said. I think in terms of body, mind, emotional, I mean, yesterday I was in a lots going on. I felt really sort of a bit lethargic, a bit unstructured, kind of lots of things coming from different directions. Went to bed early, had a massive Greek salad with the intention of getting up super early. And I worked out on the beach, which I know sounds very luxurious, for about an hour. Then I swam for about half an hour. And my entire mindset has changed, not just because of the satisfaction and the dopamine and everything else, but because I've done what I wanted to do for the last few days, because it's that sense of accomplishment as well as the dopamine and everything else. So Mark and I talk a lot about daily movement, and I now get quite a little bit frustrated if I haven't done something every day which doesn't move, even if it's a little walk up the street. So in terms of habits, I think I feel much better when I've done something, albeit small, because it's part of my routine. So that's how I feel. But yeah, great today. Thanks.
What's that like for you, Joe? Because we've touched on that. You're very active. If you don't get your daily movement in, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's frustrated. So I know I'm more irritable. You know, I have a young son. He's nearly 4. Challenging to say the least at times, and I know I show up the better version of myself, not quite maybe the best, what's to say what the best is, but a better version of myself if I have moved my body. So when I know there's limitations around getting to a class, for example, I would make sure I walk him to nursery. I've moved my body, I've stepped out, I've not jumped in the car just because I could. I think it's important for him, but I also think it's important for me to have moved there and back, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back. That might be all I've managed to do, but that's better than nothing, because otherwise I know I'm sort of frustrated. My body is also telling me, like, I can't just sit here all day, you know, and I love what I do and having conversations with people and kind of offering that therapy, but I need to move my body.
Amazing.
Do you believe... Go on, Mark.
No, Ed, you go for it, bud. I've talked too much.
No, I was going to say, I mean, you know, you're a mum of a young child, you're working. You know, we often believe, and it's very difficult, or the perception is, I don't have the time. I'm not so sure. I think, you know, I do get that mums particularly are very time constrained. I also get that people commuting into London on a 6 o'clock train, working all day and coming back. I mean, but, you know, there are ways to exercise, aren't there, of course? And I guess, how do you say to someone, I just don't have time to exercise? What would you say to them? Because I would be quite blunt and say that's BS, right? Make some time.
Yeah, walk your child to school. Walk your child
Yeah.
to school. There's the solution.
So I always come from a standpoint of curiosity.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
explore that, right? So in a therapy setting, I'm just always super curious. What help me understand what your day looks like, what your week looks like, where is the opportunity, what's getting in the way of that, what are the actual sort of physical things that are getting in the way, but also what's the internal block, what are the thoughts you're having about doing that. And look, I work with a lot of people with sort of moderate to severe depression who can't think of anything worse than getting up and moving their bodies because it's affecting their lethargy, they're not sleeping well. And the idea of doing something active is just a really big block for them. But also when we sort of say, oh, you need to do some exercise, their mind often jumps to go for a run, do something really significant. So it's about helping them. What's coming to your mind when I ask you about, just moving your body a bit? And often they say, oh, I'm so unfit, I couldn't do anything. And I might say, well, do you like being in the garden? What opportunity do you have there about kind of increasing the intensity of that? So you just loads of exploration and curiosity. You tend to be able to find something that somebody would be willing to do. But for those who've never done exercise, the idea of movement feels really scary.
I can relate to that. My family do not move in terms of do not walk on a regular basis. From what I believe, never been to a gym. And the thought of them exercising absolutely fills them with dread. What do you mean? It sounds so hard, but it's merely a thought. What I loved about what you were saying, Joe, is this curiosity, this exploration. It sounds like you seek clarity around the weekly schedule, because more often than not, we can tell ourselves these BS stories of, like Ed's saying, we don't have time, but actually when your thought process is flawed, right? That's a real big thing that I find I say on a regular basis. I'll be speaking to somebody and they'll say something else. You then another thing that I love that you're doing there is the questioning. You're asking big open questions, which is allowing them to really think about their response. It's not like how are you?
Yeah.
Fine. Are you okay? Yes. It's not this automated response where you're not having to raise some consciousness or awareness around that response.
Yeah. And you've got to remember the difference between having that conversation in a therapy setting versus at home, right? So if you talk to a partner or a friend, what do people typically do when you're coming up with sort of a block? They're most likely to come at you with solutions. Try this, do that, try this. How about this? Do this. I do this, right? Whereas in a therapy setting, you're really acknowledging the experience or the challenge that they're having and the emotion that fits with that, and allowing them to explore it with you to come to a conclusion. And people give these solutions in our friends and family relationships because they want to help. The intentions are good, or maybe they're feeling impatient. They're like, I'll just do this. But that's when you've got to think about what's different within a therapy kind of setting, is that it's kind of, I'm here to take whatever anybody wants to bring, and I can hold that space for you and we'll explore it together.
It's different,
isn't it? Well, I love that, because what I heard there is conscious parenting as well. Like I imagine, and I'm making an assumption here, that you're taking that approach then into how you parent a young man, right? A young boy.
Yeah.
Because it's very much about not telling him what to do. It's about understanding how he views the world by asking those curiosity, exploration questions. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about managing emotions, I don't want to derail your plan too much here, but if you think about managing emotions, what most of us do is try and escape difficult emotions.
Yes.
And that can be the thread to what are our beliefs about emotions, what's our relationship with emotions. And in front of me, I've got a young boy who I want him to know any emotion is okay with me. I will be in it with you. And actually, I don't want to just sort of get you out of it. I want you to be able to sit in it, explore it, and I will just comfort you, so that when he's a grown man, he can kind of go, I feel fed up, I feel sad, I feel frustrated. That's okay, you know, and he's learned the skills to sort of regulate that himself. But that comes from me now. That's my, you know, not solely my responsibility, his dad's responsibility, grandparents' responsibilities, but they are a blank slate, and it's how we're going to support him with his emotions. So he knows he doesn't need to be ashamed of his emotions as a man, doesn't need to hide them.
Yeah.
Amazing. Ed, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, normalizing emotions from a young age is absolutely talking about. I think you introduced when Mark was dialing in about inner child work and that normalization of emotions, maybe for men more so than women. I mean, whatever the generalization is, but yes, absolutely. Because if people are distracting themselves from destructive emotions in many different ways in life, and there's lots of self-sabotage things that Mark and I have talked about, and you can list whether it's overworking or alcohol, drugs, television, social media. I mean, it's all distracting yourself from feeling. Because nobody really these days wants to particularly sit with their own mind and emotions. So normalizing what you're thinking and how the emotions are coming is the first step, maybe, to not being afraid and trying to run away from them, which I think is a pattern for a lot of people at points in their lives. So totally support the concept of, you can't feel it, you can't heal it is an easy throwaway. And it's the skills to know what to do with the emotions, isn't it, and the thoughts, which is why exercises. And I wanted to ask you, Joe, I mean, this fascinates me because I think there's a degree of delusion in most human beings in parts of their life. And I can see, I'm trying to be sympathetic to somebody who doesn't understand the benefits of even a walk or getting outside and doing some exercise, and just doesn't have that mindset or the skills, or for them it's something they're afraid of, and they find other activities that are maybe more comfortable and familiar. So what, it's an open question. I mean, what do you say to, I think most people realize that some exercise and getting outside and getting out your head is a good thing. When you're confronted with someone that just doesn't see that, and sorry, just before I finish, I went to Andy's Man Club, fantastic organization across the country, getting men to talk. I did a quick survey of about 30 of the guys after I'd been going, listening and learning. And I said, how many of you are going for moderate exercise, per week? And the answer staggered me. One person was out of 30, albeit only 20 replied, was doing exercise 1 time a week. And I said, how many times are you drinking of the 30 guys? And well over 50% of them were drinking more than 2 or 3 times a week. So the simple brutal reality is getting people, I think, to a point where the basics that they show up with are to try and look after themselves. In doing the basics before you get onto microfloras and biogut and everything else, and because it's just too overwhelming, I suppose, for many people. And I guess the question to you is, if you're watching this and you're struggling to do the basics right, what would you say to them?
Yeah, again, it's so dynamic situation based on that person. I'd be, if someone says like, no, is it that I don't want to do it, or is it that I just physically can't do it? Is there anybody in their life that can help them with it? I would be also kind of encouraging them to do a bit of research. So outside of therapy, you can learn so much by research the nice guidelines, or some guidelines on exercise, on mood. Maybe they need a bit more information to actually really inform their choice. Do they need to see the research which is saying exercise in itself can really improve symptoms of depression? There have been times where if I've been in a session with somebody, I would say, let's go for a walk now. If you really can't do it and it feels really hard, grab your headphones. Can you put them in your phone? Let's just, if we're having a virtual session or if we're in the room, I'll say, let's just move. Let's experiment. Again, coming back to this curiosity. What happens if we walk for 10 minutes around the block? What does that actually feel like? Yeah, but it's also about people coming to being compassionate with themselves. This is hard for me, and I'm going to do it anyway. rather than going, oh, I want to, but I can't, but I can't, but I can't, but I don't want to, but, and all this but gets in the way. It's hard for me, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. But there'll be lots of different things, Ed, feeding into why somebody is just saying, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. So they might need somebody else from an outside perspective to help them understand why they're saying that, rather than just like put your shoes by the door, get your running kit out the night before, so it's in your face and you're more likely to put it on, because they've probably tried that. Don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does. I mean, I'm sorry, go on, Mark. I'm talking over you.
All I was going to say quickly, Ed, was that this is a cool conversation, because you're coming from a place of love, where when you want to get someone moving, it's like, okay, is there this magic thing that you can say that gets them moving and understand the benefit of exercise? But what I hear is Joe saying is about helping them, because long term it's going to help them if they understand why they don't want to exercise, or they think it's not beneficial for them, right? And this is the whole idea of truly understanding oneself, right? Okay, how do you feel? Why do you feel that the exercise is not important, when clearly we're all active people? We've talked openly about when we don't move, how it makes us feel, and how we feel that we turn up in a different state. It's just not as, it's the whole, you can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Go on, Ed, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking as you were talking, I mean, you know, exercising daily is just one behavioral thing that we can do to make our lives better. And there are many things that we all do wrong and don't do that we should do. And we sabotage ourselves in lots of different ways, emotionally, with friends, relationships, you know. And I think I sort of come back to, it may be exercise for some people, it may be diet, it may be sugar, it may be whatever. And there seems to be, most people have a thing that they just don't, it's a wall and it's a door that's closed, and they just don't, they're not able, they don't want to, they don't want to go through it. And it's that, and we all have different things in our lives where, you know, I'm sure I can think of 5 or 6 in my life that I know it's not great for me. I mean, I started smoking 3 months ago, like after 25 years, and I'm trying desperately to stop it. And I know it's no good. I know it's horrific for me. But because I'm in Corfu, I think it's okay. So I'm justifying in my mind that it's just a short-term thing. It's fine. It's just I'm on holiday. It could kill me, right? And it's the same mindset that people have to do all kinds of things. And I guess people that don't see the benefit of going for a walk, they've built a wall in their mind that for some reason they don't want to jump over or walk through that door. And it's a fascinating, absolutely fascinating for people who are far more educated than I am, to understand why we build these. Maybe it's safety, maybe it's fear of change, maybe it's comfort of being unhappy is comfortable. We know what it is. You know,
absolutely, all of those.
Let's be blunt. Some people like staying in an environment where they attach themselves to, and they can be that person because it gives them something to identify with. And this psychological
and it's safe. It's familiar, right? It's safe and it's familiar. So by you having to decide to stop smoking, you've got to actually put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. So when people come for therapy for anxiety-based issues, for example, afraid of getting in a lift, there is no way really I'm going to get them over their fear of a lift without getting in a lift. And they've got to be willing to sit in that discomfort. So there's something maybe about those who sort of can't exercise are also dealing with this. I've got to put myself in a really uncomfortable situation. Maybe that's socially because there's going to be other people there in a CrossFit class, or you know, physically I'm not going to like the way my body feels if I'm jogging, you know, if they have a difficult relationship with their body. It is about entering again, because what we're so tuned into doing is sort of, oh, it feels bad, don't do it. And actually it's about doing it, feeling that discomfort, knowing what that is, and then kind of moving through that. You know, we can't feel the wave come up and then knowing at some point this will start to plateau and kind of come down, but there's no way of just sort of getting out the other side without going through it.
Joe, quick question. How important is it for someone that might be watching this, if they're struggling with anything, whether it's not exercising or smoking or drink anything, how important is it to tell people about that issue you're confronting? to gain that accountability, or would you suggest that they progress by themselves because it gives them confidence as they make small steps rather than setting a big target, which they may therefore be, unhappy about not reaching? There's also that anxiety and pressure of hitting something they're struggling with, right? So would you say different for everyone, or?
It can be, but I think what comes back to this idea of sort of our emotional state, right? So actually what a lot of people could benefit from is saying, could you help me with this? Could you help me? I really want to get into jogging, or I'd really like to go to a CrossFit class or yoga or swimming or just power walk up and down the stairs. Could you help me? And that means that they are acknowledging that it's difficult and actually then being vulnerable enough to sort of say, I'm feeling really nervous about this. Like something's not feeling good. Can you help me? And people don't ask for help because that comes with a whole load of so everybody has these beliefs about themselves, about the world. And then from that, we create almost like our rule book for life. And so they've got this rule that if I ask for help, others will think I'm weak or they'll laugh at me. And that's informed from their past, right? But actually, if people feel there's somebody in their life that they could go to and say, hey, could you meet me for a walk? That's surely going to help. Humans are much better when we're connected. Loneliness is awful. Humans do not want to be lonely. We want to be connected. So if somebody has someone in their life who they could say, could you do this with me? Or they feel safe enough to ask for help, I would always suggest doing that. It's much better than trying to sort of go it alone because,
I think I would agree. And also maybe that the case that some people don't have people who are exercise driven in their lives. So there's a big push there to maybe find people that they can grow with. And that's a big theme of things that we talk about, is that your environment is a massive contributor to your status, whether it be drinking buddies or whatever. So that is super important for people to maybe look at who they're hanging out with and what kind of community they're in if they want to make certain changes. Because we all need help, I think, don't we? Yeah. Mark, don't we need help?
We do. And I'm going to do my best to help navigate this conversation. I'm very but Joe is in high demand, and we only have her for a few more minutes. So
okay, it's all right. No, we got until just after 1:30. We're okay.
Okay, cool. So, would you mind, guys? We talked about willingness there, right? And, first of all, Ed, to be on a platform that is about self-awareness and optimizing your health, and to open up about something that you've been struggling with for a number of months is extremely courageous, right? So, no, I'm being obviously deadly serious. Yeah. And I thought it might be a lovely opportunity because Joe mentioned about a tool that she uses that she's obviously specializes in terms of CBT, and perhaps to normalize this conversation and make it relatable to other people watching and our own experiences. We could perhaps create a scenario here where Joe would talk someone like Ed, who wanted some help on this particular topic. So the question would be, Joe, if Ed came to you asking for help on this particular topic, how would you navigate the conversation?
Yeah, so with something, I'm just confirming we're talking about the cigarettes here, right? Before I launch into it. When a behavior sort of comes up for somebody that they're noticing is actually quite unhelpful, what we often get stuck in, firstly thinking about, is like, what's wrong with it? What's this taking away from me? And sometimes when it's kind of a behavioral thing like smoking or excessive gaming or gambling or pornography or something like that, you're wanting to start thinking, well, what's it actually giving me? What's the good thing about this? What am I enjoying from this? Because sometimes it's replacing something for us, so we want to try and understand that. But from a sort of cognitive behavioral kind of therapy perspective, I'd be thinking about, okay, well, what's the goal? What are we aiming for here? Is it to stop? And what are the kind of triggering situations? So it's in the evenings or is it in the morning? And get a situation kind of to play out where, okay, that's the situation. What's the thought that goes through your mind? So we're always looking for the cognitive element, the thinking process. what are you thinking about when you're getting this sense of like, I'd like a cigarette? And is that already at the point where you're thinking, I shouldn't do this, I don't want to do this? Or is it currently at the place where you're thinking, I really want this, this is going to feel good for me? Like, are you aware of what thinking is sort of taking hold at that point, Ed?
Gosh, great question. The feeling so it's patterns. Why I'm doing it is because I get up in the morning and I associate an idea that I get up, I have a cup of coffee and I have a cigarette in my balcony, and I now have associated that with almost like in part of a ritual. And it's also because I'm taking back the sort of possibly the freedom I had when I used to smoke in my 20s, and I'm now associating my freedom mindset with this kind of laissez-faire. It's okay. I can do what I want. I'm okay. And also because I exercise every day and eat quite clean, I think it's okay. So I'm justifying things in my mind, building pictures and patterns of recognition to memories, even though I know it's incredibly bad for me. And I also justify my behavior with, I'll stop in a few weeks, so it doesn't matter. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And does that keep kind of moving forward? That goalpost of a few weeks sort of keeps moving forward.
Correct. Which is what I think you kick the can down the road. And also because I started off, it was a cigarette with 2 a day. Now it's escalated to, because I'm on my own a lot and I'm working at home, working on a house. It's part boredom, it's part just habit, and I don't. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question. I don't know if it answers it.
So I suppose a sort of a loose sort of framework for thinking about things would be to work out what are the thoughts I'm having around any given situation, whether it was this or anything. What are the thoughts I'm having about myself? Because often they're about ourselves, they're critical about ourselves. How is this making me feel emotionally and in my body? And what are the behaviors that are reinforcing? So cognitive behavioral therapy looks at the link between our thinking patterns and our behaviors and how those are affecting the way that we feel. So if we can do something with one of those, it's going to affect the way that we feel. Now, I suppose with the smoking, you're more thinking about a behavioral habit that's taken hold. So you want to find something to help break that pattern. You'd want to be thinking about, short-term, long-term consequences, the intended consequence, the unintended consequence, what's the motivation, where's this going to find me in 2 years if I'm still doing this? So you'd be looking more at behavioral change. Whereas in other situations that people use CBT for, you'd be more thinking about what are the thinking processes taking hold, because we all filter in and out information that fits. So what you're describing there is you're kind of filtering out at that moment all the bits that are telling you I shouldn't be doing this, and the thoughts you're paying more attention to are, it's only for now, I'll give up in a few weeks. And actually being able to bring all of those thoughts into the same sort of sphere will help you then have a more, what we go for is sort of balanced kind of ideas. We're not going, I shouldn't do this, this is great. We're thinking, hang on a minute, I need to bring everything back into play here.
It's conscious thinking before your emotions of needing and wanting. Like all pleasure seeking, I suppose, it's being able to think about these habits in rational, normal times. When you're, and I read a great book called My Mental Mess, which basically says every morning for half an hour you should think about your disruptive emotions. And you should write down why you're feeling something at a certain event, maybe a cigarette, and you should rationally then consider the attachment of that emotion to the thoughts and memories that they bring up, because a lot of the repeat patterns that we sink into and emotional reactions to certain behaviors are pulled from long-standing memories. So if you think about it when you're not in that moment, when you're not emotional, you can then reframe the brain. And it's a fascinating book. I'd really recommend it to anyone. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's very, very good. It's a managed program, and it picks on, I guess, some sort of NLP CBT theory of proactive thinking around disruptive emotions when you're in a calm state. It comes Mark. While it comes back in, and I'm conscious of your time, Jo, and getting the most out of the conversation. So What was
I think,
about?
can I just comment on one thing there though? Because I think when we're talking in these conversations about loads of really good ideas, what you can find is that people feel a huge sense of pressure to like, I need to put all these things in practice, and you know, these people are talking so motivationally about doing this and that and that, and then I suddenly sit there with a notepad and go, how do I write down my thought, and what is it I need to do? And for people to remember that it's a really hard practice. So the things we talk about here, go and try this, go and do that. This is a great thing to do. Also remembering that that is really difficult, you know, and that for people will go away from these conversations you're having with different people, maybe with really interesting ideas of things they want to put into practice, and then feel really stuck with it, because the reality is these are hard things to do on your own. You've got to be really motivated to do a lot of self-directed reading and self-reflection. And that if people are finding that really difficult, you know, that's okay. It is difficult. If we've thought in one way for a really long time based on our childhood experiences, our you know, later experiences, it's not as easy as just kind of writing down a few things and off you go. So people just remember that it is hard, and that's okay.
Sure. Welcome back, Mark. Did you get hit by a dumbbell? Oh, he's got...
Barbell came flying through the window. No, God.
He's lost his voice. Can't hear you, bud. It's okay. It's okay. We'll carry on. We'll pad time. We can always edit out this stuff and come back in. Oh, you can you hear us? Can you hear us? Okay.
No, you can't hear us.
This is interesting. This has never happened before. So I think Mark's asking me to kind of continue without his vocals. So Joe, how long have you got left? Just conscious.
So I've got till 25 to. I've got a meeting at 2:35. So I've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay, so I think what would be really helpful for viewers then is based upon your experience of counselling and therapy. Mm-hmm. If people are watching this thinking, you know, I know that I've got a problem with something, and I feel that it's unhealthy for me and it's affecting my relationships, or it's making me feel guilty or shameful. What would you give simple steps, you know, habit stacking, some skills that they need to do? Like, not just, it's a bit of advice off a podcast that, you know, but to stop people. We had a guy on last week talking about overwhelm and burnout. Yeah. The reality is a lot of people will leave things until, you know, I think there's a Japanese word which like a kensho moment, where you have a calamitous sort of situation. How do people avoid these meltdowns, breakdowns, job losses, jail, whatever it is?
Yeah, you know, we're always wanting to try and catch things early, aren't we? We want to try and get people early in their journey. So if you've got people listening who are, you know, they're not quite at that burnout stage, but they feel it's coming, now's your time to take action before it really kicks in. But often that's not the case. People reach that point and then they go, I really need some help. And actually, the more people can open up to the idea of getting help for these things. So yes, there's loads of good reading out there. There's loads of good things you can listen to. But there's no one toolkit that everybody can apply, right? So think about those foundational things to start with, like your sleep, like your diet, like your movement patterns. What are the external sort of stresses? Is there some problem solving? But all the internal stuff needs some space too. What are your feelings about your emotions? Can I express those safely? Is there anywhere I can express those too? And maybe start by trying to find the courage to talk to somebody that is not a professional, but in your life, about one thing that you're struggling with, right? Because actually you might find that person's really responsive. You can often find that that's not the case. They don't know how to support you. But I think if you want to get those foundational things sorted first, and then you can start thinking, what's coming up for me emotionally.
Okay, great advice. I'm going to put my male hat on for a second, if I may. Back to referencing Andy's Man Club, there were men in there who had left their house, sat in their drive. There were men that had driven to the car park 5, 6, 10 times, sat in their car, afraid to walk through the door of a chat group. And once they'd come in, their lives, just being able to express themselves. I only went 5 or 6 times. What do you say, and again, putting you on the spot a little bit, to somebody, and we hear this is a male-centered thing, but it's not specifically men, who just don't have the capability to say, I need some help?
Yeah, so you'd want to be looking where else they can find it. If they can't say it, there's loads of good resources online that I can link in to you guys afterwards.
Okay.
Get some books. Again, can suggest some sort of books to look at. There's a really good like overcoming series, so overcoming anxiety, overcoming depression, overcoming self-esteem, childhood trauma, that are really nice user-friendly self-help manuals. Because if you know, some people don't feel they can, feel so much shame, so much you know, fear about what will happen because they've not been in a position where it's been safe to share their emotions before, so they don't know what it's going to be like if they do. So just starting that process of listening to information like this, where you've got two men who are kind of saying, I'm okay to sort of talk about how I feel, normalizes the process. Look at some self-help material, download some apps, just start bringing that content into your sphere, right? And if it's in there more and you're listening to it, it becomes, you know, part of your language, then you might feel more kind of courageous to talk about it. Or if you can't ask anybody you know for help, find somebody professional to ask. Then it doesn't have to have anything to do with them in your lives.
Brilliant. Great advice. Mark's just asked a question about which one book you would recommend. I missed the second bit of the question. But I'm thinking, Mark, that's the question. What one book would you recommend?
Yeah, one book is challenging.
Would dramatically change your thinking. What free resources would you recommend to someone that feels that they can't afford to invest in therapy, and what book would you do?
So I think it's really important then to highlight what free therapy is available, because I'm not sure people are aware so much. So I work in a private practice and also for the NHS, and the NHS now are really driving their NHS Talking Therapies. And NHS Talking Therapies is free for anybody registered with a GP all around the country, and they are all self-referral. So unlike, you know, if you want to see a dermatologist or something like that, you need to go to the GP and speak to them and they do the referral. If you go on the NHS website and look at NHS Talking Therapies, you can self-refer wherever you are. It'll link you to the local service, which is great. I mean, that's moved on so much that people can just do that themselves. Now, all different areas around the country have different sort of offers, but primarily what they offer in the NHS is CBT. So that you are exploring what's going on for you, but also finding kind of tools and techniques to get out the other side.
So am I understanding this right, Joe? You can actually go and have CBT with a person on the NHS? You
can.
Well, I think most people don't even know that.
No, well, exactly, which is what's so important, isn't it? So, you know, where we work, we do a lot of work with people in the borough to try and raise awareness for this. And obviously there are, you know, some people that CBT isn't suitable for everybody, right? We don't want to offer a therapy to somebody that doesn't suit that style. So there's lots of different types of talking therapies, but that's the job of the kind of assessing team in the talking therapy service, to sort of say, in a first half an hour call with somebody, what's going on for you? What are you looking for? And then we are the experts in this. You are the expert in your problem. We are the expert on the services, on the therapy models. We'll guide you. But yeah, people don't know that they can just make that inquiry.
So there's a lot of resources. I mean, you can put your recommended books, if you can't think of one right now, we'll put it in the YouTube caption with where people can find you, and any other free resources. But I think that's great advice if people are looking to escalate this sort of self growth. And you know, what about GPs? You know, how do people know? Again, difficult question. How do people know when what they're going through is a mental health crisis which needs a GP versus evolution and growth and improvement? And
it's a really good question. I mean, where people are, their functioning is really impacted, you know, so they're not sleeping, not eating, somebody's sort of lost a lot of weight, or they're starting to feel suicidal, having thoughts about wanting to harm themselves, life really is not worth living. We'd always encourage people to speak to their GP to see whether, you know, medication could be useful alongside therapy, or whether they need, you know, more intense input to help those challenging thoughts sort of subside. But lots of people who experience challenges with anxiety and depression have thoughts about ending their life. It doesn't mean they're going to go and do that. So it's also something not to be sort of alarmed by if you're having that experience, but knowing what level of do I feel concerned about my safety. And if you do, always go and talk to your GP. They're actually
always
quite responsive to your safety. It's everybody's priority, right?
Absolutely, always. And if in doubt, go to the GP. If you've got no one else to speak to, go to you know, get some expert advice. There's a lot of tips you've given there, Joe. I mean, there's a lot that people can think about, a lot of resources. I guess, do we want to, I think maybe just another question in terms of, I guess, the connection between, you mentioned at the start of the conversation, the gut is the second brain or something like that. And there's now a lot of research going into the impact that your, is it the microdome or the gut biome?
Lots of stuff about that now,
and I think we've all been in situations where we've eaten badly, you know, we've drunk too much, and we feel the serotonin, the dopamine, the chemicals are well off. You know, I think most people are aware that alcohol can be a depressant. That connection, is there any tips? Again, I haven't thought about this question. Is there any tips you can give about improving your gut health for your brain and your mood?
Probably not off the top of my head. It's a bit more
eat more yogurt,
doctory, I guess. Eat more yogurt. But I suppose it's just having increased awareness of how those two things are connected, right? And if you know, a lot of people are going to the GP with, you know, physical illness, or they're having specialist, you know, investigations over something, and how often are the doctors saying, are you stressed, you know, or including that as part of their assessment, and not as often as they should be, because what you find is lots of research is now showing that if people are managing their stress or their emotional state, unpacking their past and things that have happened, it really threads through to their emotional well-being. So there's definitely a book which talks about this connection between illness and mental health, and how, you know, actually people with long-term health conditions, the conditions can improve if they're working on their stress and the way they manage their emotional state. And that's just, isn't that amazing? You know, why are we only learning about that now, right? So definitely something to look at as well.
Absolutely. Secrets make you sick. I mean, I think it's not, you know, I don't know the research, but I think it's fairly widely held belief that mental health can cause physical issues, and I think we all know the word, you know, stress headaches and everything else, tension headaches.
Where's it going? If you've got all this stress and this trauma and you're kind of pushing it all inside, I mean, it's got to go somewhere. So it's got to go somewhere. I think that's a great sort of lesson for people, is get it out, you know, talk, share, journal, research, you know, get these words down, get it out of your system, and hopefully there'll be positive impact of that. That connection from actually just saying, I'm feeling angry, right? So anger for a man that comes with lots of different sort of thoughts and feelings, and women. This idea of anger being something I need to sort of not show or not do, or not, shouldn't feel that. You absolutely should. There is a place for anger. So allowing that, you know, a lot of the sort of trauma is lots of misdirected anger towards the self, rather than actually feeling angry about what happened to you or what you didn't get as a child. So tuning into that again releases a lot of sort of repressed feelings inside, and you know, it can be amazing to explore all of that with people in therapy, but also really challenging.
Yeah, I'm going to finish, if I may, wrap this up. Just one last question, and Mark can respond on the chat because he can't talk. In terms of how would you explain to someone who doesn't understand inner child work what it is, so they've got a basic grasp of it?
Yeah, that's a really nice question. So everybody is born, aren't they, with basically a blank slate, right? We don't have a sense of our worth when we're born. We're there, and you know, we have a right to feel loved and to be cared for and nurtured and seen and heard and valued. And that little person is within us now. I have a child within me, as do we all. And sometimes what you find as people go through life is they're struggling with emotions, or they're feeling this self-esteem or worthlessness, or they're really pushing for something. They want to be seen, or they're not being seen and heard. That's the adult self, but also that child sort of within them. And often what an adult needs is a hug. They need somebody to validate their experience, but that's also that child within you saying, see me, hear me, love me, care for me, encourage me, right? And I see that in men in my life, you know, kind of, they want to be held, they want to be encouraged. So when we work on that in therapy, we're often parenting ourselves. Yes, we're showing up for ourselves as and they call it reparenting. It's a really nice thing to kind of look up. You're showing up for yourself, going, I'm here for you, I've got you. Whatever way you're showing up for me today is fine, because that's what we would say to a child. So even if you don't have children yourself, for anybody who's kind of listening, think about maybe a niece or a nephew or a picture of yourself as a kid, and look at that and go, gosh, you were really young. Look at you, you know, you were young, you were, you know, didn't really know what was going on. I'm here for you now. I'm showing up for you. And that person is within you. So you can talk to yourself as you would in the way you would have wanted. And it's really powerful and can be really moving in therapy for somebody to go through that journey.
It's a wonderful way to end. I feel a little bit emotional actually thinking about that. I mean, me talking to little Edward, it's quite a powerful image, right? And it's
hugely
about
powerful.
Love and forgiveness, and very excellent way to end, Joe. Some great, really good conversation. Sorry about Mark's audio at the end. Some really really good insights.
One way to stop him talking, Ed.
Yeah, well, you know, it comes from a place of love, as he tells.
It does. I know.
Okay, well, there's a lot there. We've covered a lot of topics. It's been really good. Thank you for coming on.
You're very welcome.
I hope people have enjoyed it. Where can people find you, Joe?
I'll put on the bottom the link to my private practice profile if anyone wanted to make a discovery call, and I'll also link in information about the NHS Talking Therapies scheme sort of nationally, so people know where they can get private free therapy if it's not affordable. Fantastic.
All the best. Take care. Keep crossfitting, both of you. And
I'll try. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this Blue Mind conversation. We hope you've enjoyed the content, and ask a small favour that you like and share the page. The bigger the page, the more interesting the guest should be, and the more content we can put out. If you are interested in talking to Mark and myself about any of the topics covered, coaching, speaking, or any other collaboration, please drop Mark or I an email at ed@Blue Mind Approach or mark@Blue Mind Approach, or contact us on our social media channels. Thank you for listening.